one of the problems that Washington faced on Friday and Saturday was trying to come up with good tools to use to influence the Kremlin. And unfortunately, since 2002, where I think there was a lot of potential for the U.S.-Russia relationship, there's been drift and then a decline in that bilateral relationship to a fairly low point in terms of the relations between Moscow and Washington. And what that meant is that Washington didn't have a lot of levers that it could pull to affect what was going on, to affect the Kremlin's thinking. I mean, there wasn't a lot of bilateral cooperation that Washington can threaten that the Russians much cared about. So one of the unfortunate aspects of the decline in the relationship, which I think both Washington and Moscow bear some responsibility for, is when it comes to a crisis like this, the sorts of tools that my former colleagues at the State Department were being asked to draw upon, the cupboard was fairly bare. Both sides have talked about the need for humanitarian assistance. So we ought to challenge both sides, including the Russians, really to open up the areas, Georgia, South Ossetia, to the international community coming in to provide humanitarian assistance, because that's also a vehicle to get international presence on the ground. Another idea to be thinking through is how do you reassure Georgia in bilateral channels about its future course with the West? And that'll be a complicated subject, but I suspect at this point Georgia needs a bit of confidence building. As we look to the conversations that we're having, and I think it's already been touched upon, but it's probably worth also not talking to just Europeans, talking to the Chinese, talking to the Central Asians, because I can't think of any country bordering Russia or near Russia that has to be happy about what's happened in the last 6 days. I mean, sovereignty and respect for territorial integrity is going to be very important in these countries, and we ought to look at a way to use that really, perhaps at some point, as a pressure if there's a need to generate a pushback on the Russians. So there are some ideas out there.